The gym at the naval base was buzzing with breathless recruits, running on treadmills, lifting weights, shouting loud enough for everyone to hear. Among them was Petty Officer Second Class Carter, young and arrogant, who never missed a chance to belittle anyone he considered beneath him. That day his target was Richard Mallory, a 75-year-old janitor quietly pushing a mop across the floor. "Hey, Grandpa, don't get in my way. No need to clean here. Move it." Richard paused for a moment. He was worn out from a tough week of work. All he wanted was to finish his shift and get some rest, but he'd have to wait for Carter to finish his set first. Richard Mallory tightened his grip on the mop handle but said nothing. At his age, he had learned that some battles simply weren't worth fighting. He took a few steps back and waited, watching as Carter flexed his muscles for the other recruits, who laughed and cheered at his every exaggerated move. "Check it out, guys. The old man's probably jealous of how much I can lift." Carter laughed, raising the dumbbells above his head. "Bet he's never seen muscles like these in his life." The other recruits burst into laughter. Seaman Recruit Thompson, a skinny 19-year-old, pointed at Richard and whispered something to the guy next to him. Seaman Recruit Martinez, not much older, mimicked Richard's slow, hunched-over mopping movements, prompting even more laughter from the group. Richard stood still, holding the cleaning tool. His calloused hands told the story of decades of honest work. He had only started working at the base 3 months earlier, after realizing his retirement wasn't enough to cover his wife's medical bills. No one there knew his story. To them, he was just the old janitor who walked slowly. "Seriously, man, you're in the way of our workout," Carter went on, now speaking directly to Richard. "Can't you clean this area later? We're busy here." Richard gave a quiet nod and began to move away, but Martinez stepped in front of him with a smug smile. "Hold on there, Grandpa. Carter's not done talking to you." Thompson joined them, arms crossed. "Yeah, maybe you should ask permission before stepping into our training zone." Richard looked at the 3 young men surrounding him. He could feel other recruits pausing their workouts to watch the scene unfold. The gym, which moments ago had been buzzing with activity, was now quieter, with everyone paying attention to the public humiliation taking place. "I'm sorry," Richard said softly, his voice barely audible. "I just need to finish my cleaning." Carter let out a loud laugh. "Did you hear that? He apologized. How sweet." He stepped closer to Richard, using their height difference to intimidate him. "You know what, old man? Maybe you should think about finding a job more suited to your age. This kind of work isn't meant for someone like you." The words sliced through the air like blades. Richard had served his country with honor for years. He'd faced situations these young men couldn't even imagine. But here he was just an elderly man trying to make an honest living. He swallowed his pride once again. "I just want to do my job," he murmured, trying to walk around the group. But Carter wasn't finished. He picked up an empty water bottle from the floor and tossed it at Richard. "Since you love cleaning so much, how about picking this up too?" The bottle hit Richard in the chest and dropped to the floor with a hollow thud. The silence in the gym grew heavy. Richard slowly bent down, his joints aching with the movement, and picked up the bottle. Thompson and Martinez exchanged glances, clearly enjoying the show. "Look how obedient he is," Thompson said with a grin. Richard placed the bottle into his cleaning cart and quietly went back to work. He moved to a farther corner of the gym, away from Carter's group, but still within earshot of their voices and laughter. Meanwhile, Carter returned to his workout but kept making loud remarks for Richard to hear. "Guys, did you see his face? He looked like he was gonna cry." Richard paused for a moment and looked down at his arm, where an old tattoo was partially hidden beneath his work shirt. He pulled the sleeve down, making sure the mark stayed covered. Some secrets were better kept. The gym slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the tension hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Richard kept moving through his cleaning routine, collecting dirty towels, wiping down benches, organizing the scattered equipment the recruits had left behind. About 20 minutes later, as Richard was cleaning a bench near the entrance, the gym door opened. A tall, gray-haired man in uniform stepped inside. It was Admiral Jonathan Fox, making one of his unannounced routine inspections. He liked to observe the recruits in their natural environment, without the usual formalities his presence would typically demand. The Admiral walked through the gym, quietly evaluating the discipline and training atmosphere. His sharp eyes picked up details that most would miss. Then he noticed Richard, bent over a bench, carefully scrubbing the surface with a cloth. He approached silently, watching the janitor work. As Richard reached out to clean a spot further down the bench, his sleeve shifted slightly upward. Admiral Fox suddenly froze. His eyes locked on Richard's arm. There, partially visible, was a tattoo that sent a chill through his veins. It was an emblem he knew all too well, a mark representing years of service and sacrifice. The emblem of the U.S. Marine Corps was inked into Richard Mallory's skin, faded with time but still unmistakable. Admiral Fox stood frozen for several seconds, as if he were seeing a ghost. His trained eyes examined the tattoo more closely. It told a story of service, sacrifice, and brotherhood, one that few could truly understand. Richard kept cleaning the bench, completely unaware he was being watched. His hands moved with the same methodical precision he had always shown. The Admiral stepped back and overheard some of the recruits making jokes about the janitor. His mind was racing with questions. Who was this man? Why was a Marine working as a janitor on a naval base? And why were the recruits treating a veteran with such disrespect? He left the gym, his pace now urgent. There was something he needed to find out immediately. Richard finished cleaning the bench and moved on to the next area. Carter and his group had moved over to the parallel bars, continuing their over-the-top displays of strength, but had thankfully forgotten about the janitor for the time being. Richard took advantage of the break to work in peace. He cleaned the wall mirrors, picked up a few abandoned water bottles, and straightened the towel shelves. Each task was carried out with care and attention to detail. Meanwhile, in his office, Admiral Fox sat down at his computer and pulled up the base's personnel records, waiting for the results to appear on the screen. The basic information came up first. Richard Mallory, 75 years old, hired 3 months ago as a contracted janitor. Local address, previous employment references from cleaning companies, clean criminal background. Nothing suggested a military past, but Admiral Fox had learned over the years that records didn't always tell the whole story. He opened another system, this one connected to the Department of Defense military archives. He entered the name and age, then waited a few seconds as the system searched through decades of files. Slowly, the results began to appear. Richard William Mallory. Enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1965. Assigned to the 3rd Marine Division. Deployed to Vietnam in 1967. The Admiral leaned in, reading each line with growing interest. The records showed a young Marine who had been sent to one of the most dangerous areas of the Vietnam conflict. He had taken part in multiple combat operations in and around the Saigon region. But it was the next line that made the Admiral catch his breath. Awarded the Silver Star for acts of exceptional valor in combat. He clicked to open the award details. The report, written over 50 years ago, described how young Richard Mallory had held an advanced position alone under heavy enemy fire, allowing a medical team to evacuate wounded soldiers from a combat zone. He had refused to abandon his post even when ammunition was running low and enemy forces were closing in. The Silver Star is one of the United States' highest military decorations for valor in combat. It is awarded only to those who demonstrate exceptional gallantry in action against an armed enemy. The Admiral kept reading. Richard had served 2 tours in Vietnam before returning to the U.S. in 1970. He had been honorably discharged with the rank of sergeant. After his military service, he worked for various civilian companies, mostly in construction and maintenance. The records also showed that he married Elizabeth Mallory in 1972. They had 2 children. No disciplinary or legal issues were noted after his time in the military. Admiral Fox closed the file and leaned back in his chair. The man being humiliated in the gym wasn't just some ordinary veteran. He was a decorated war hero, someone who had risked his life to save others. And here he was at 75 years old, working as a janitor to make ends meet, being treated like dirt by recruits who weren't even born when he was dodging enemy bullets in a jungle thousands of miles from home. The Admiral felt a mix of anger and sadness for the young soldiers who had no idea how to treat a veteran. He looked at the clock. It was nearly 11 a.m. The gym would still be busy, and Richard was probably still there, quietly continuing his cleaning routine. The Admiral stood up, adjusted his uniform, and walked toward the door. There was something he needed to do. As he made his way down the base corridors toward the gym, he thought of all the veterans he had met over the years, men and women who had served with honor and returned to a society that often forgot or ignored them. Richard Mallory wouldn't be one of them. Not as long as Admiral Fox had authority on that base. The gym doors came into view, and the Admiral could hear the familiar sounds of clanking weights and soldiers' voices. It was time to teach a lesson those young recruits would never forget. Admiral Fox pushed open the gym doors with purpose. This time, his entrance did not go unnoticed. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Richard, who was now near the locker rooms, neatly stacking clean towels on a shelf. The janitor moved with the same quiet dedication as always, fully focused on his task. Petty Officer Second Class Carter and his group were now in the free weights section, still making loud remarks and cracking jokes. Carter was showing off, lifting heavy dumbbells, clearly trying to impress the younger recruits who watched him with admiration. The Admiral walked slowly through the gym, observing the energy of the room. He positioned himself in a spot where he could clearly see both Richard and Carter's group. He wanted to witness with his own eyes how a decorated veteran was being treated on the very base he commanded. "Hey, Martinez," Carter said loudly. "I bet you can lift more than that old man can push in his cart." Martinez flexed his arms in an exaggerated motion. "Man, I bet I could lift the whole cart, with him in it." Laughter echoed across the gym. Some recruits looked shocked by Carter's cruelty. Others appeared uncomfortable, shifting in place, but none had the courage to speak up. That was when Admiral Fox decided he had seen enough. He had just watched a decorated war veteran being publicly ridiculed by young men who had no idea who they were mocking. It was time to put an end to it. Admiral Fox stepped forward, stopping just a few feet from the group, his eyes locked onto the scene unfolding in front of him. That's when Admiral Fox's strong, commanding voice cut through the silence like thunder. "Attention!" The order echoed off the gym walls with such force that everyone snapped to attention instinctively. Carter, Thompson, and Martinez spun around in shock, finally realizing the Admiral's presence. Everyone quickly formed makeshift rows, standing at attention. The clanging of weights stopped completely, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. Admiral Fox walked slowly to the center of the group, his eyes scanning every face. When he reached Richard, he stopped and looked him straight in the eye. "Sergeant Richard Mallory," the Admiral said, his voice clear and reverent. "3rd Marine Division, Vietnam veteran, recipient of the Silver Star for exceptional valor in combat." A shocked murmur spread through the gym. Carter visibly paled, his eyes widening as he processed the Admiral's words. Richard tried to lower his gaze, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, but the Admiral continued. "This man fought for all of us in Vietnam. He held a defensive position under intense enemy fire, allowing a medical team to evacuate 12 wounded American soldiers. He refused to abandon his post even when his ammunition was nearly gone, and enemy forces were closing in." The silence in the gym was now absolute. Carter looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His arrogance had vanished, replaced by a growing look of horror as the weight of his actions sank in. Admiral Fox turned directly toward him. "Petty Officer Second Class Carter, today you spent your time mocking a hero, a man who risked his life so that soldiers like you could return home to your families." Carter tried to speak, but no words came out. "This man," the Admiral continued, pointing at Richard, "stood for the values you are supposed to honor. While you were making jokes about his age and appearance, he was demonstrating the kind of military discipline you clearly haven't learned yet." Then the Admiral did something no one expected. He stood directly in front of Richard and slowly raised his right hand in a solemn salute. "Sergeant Mallory," he said, his voice filled with genuine respect, "it is an honor to be in your presence." The impact was immediate and profound. One by one, everyone in the gym followed the Admiral's example, offering a crisp salute to the man who moments before had been treated like he didn't matter. Richard stood still, visibly moved and slightly embarrassed by the attention. His hands trembled as he tried to process the dramatic shift in atmosphere. "Sir," Richard said quietly, "I was just doing my job, like any Marine would." "No," the Admiral replied firmly. "You did far more than that, and the fact that you're still here, working honestly at 75, shows you're still serving with the same dignity you always have." He turned again to Carter, who was now visibly shaking. "Petty Officer Carter, do you have anything to say to Sergeant Mallory?" Carter stepped forward on unsteady legs. Shame was written all over his face as he struggled to find the right words. "Sergeant Mallory," he began, his voice cracking with emotion, "I offer you my sincere apology, sir. There's no excuse for my behavior. I disrespected my uniform and insulted a true American hero. I don't even deserve to be in the same room as you." Richard looked at the young man for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle, free of anger or resentment. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them. Respect everyone, no matter how they look or what their job is. Respect comes before honor." The simple words carried the weight of decades of experience and wisdom. Carter nodded vigorously, taking in every word as if it were sacred teaching. Admiral Fox looked around the gym, locking eyes with each person present. "Let this be a lesson to all of you," he said. "You never know when you're in the presence of a hero. Treat every person with dignity and respect, because you never know what battles they've already fought." In the days that followed, the story spread across the base like wildfire. Richard Mallory continued his janitorial work, pushing his mop with the same quiet dedication as always. But now, everyone who crossed his path greeted him with genuine respect. Some even stopped to talk, eager to hear his stories. He had spent decades keeping his past to himself, working humbly without expecting recognition. And as Richard worked, the Marine Corps emblem on his arm remained hidden beneath his sleeve. But now, a new generation of soldiers knew exactly what it meant. Not just a symbol, but the mark of a man who had served with honor and never stopped serving. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories just like this.